welcome back to Embodied CEO, the podcast. It's all about who you are, how you stay embodied as you grow, and how you step into your next level self all at the same time. Today's episode is one that will stay with you long after you listen, honestly. I am sitting down with Kristin Windsor, a body, mind, soul mentor, teacher, and healer who has overcome over 100 debilitating health battles, complex trauma, and even amnesia, like completely on her own. Through all the self taught neuroscience and deep work that she's done, she not only healed herself, but developed a revolutionary approach to nervous system healing. And now she's here to share how we can rewire from the inside out and create true transformation. Mind boggling, right? This is an episode about resilience, self trust, and becoming your own healer and hero. And so take a deep breath, drop into your body, and let's get into it.
I love that so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I'm so excited for this one. This is going to be a long and exciting journey. Oh, beautiful. And FYI, guys, we just did a mirror, one of her mirror, what is it, like a meditation? It was insane. And
I
I
call it
spent
an eye gazing practice
eye
or
gazing
a
practice.
marathon.
Yeah, a marathon. It really was. Yeah. It is a journey within. And I wanted to share. I started singing to myself afterwards, and that's not a thing that has happened before. It was beautiful. So I highly recommend that one.
Yes, and you can definitely grab that. That's one of my free offerings. So it'll probably be shared with the show note links. You can go to my free gifts and you can grab that 20-minute guided mirror practice. It's definitely really powerful. I feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah, me too. Highly needed that. Very, very much so. So I love it. Okay, so I always love to start with a check-in and ask what's one win and what's challenge in one challenge in your world right now.
I love it. So my win and challenge kind of actually go hand in hand. My greatest challenge is rewriting my identity after healing from 7 years of amnesia. And my greatest win is that I'm rewriting my identity after healing from 7 years of amnesia. We'll share a lot about that in the story today. But with that, like the challenge is like, how do you learn to connect with yourself in a way that doesn't need to be defined by anything you've ever gone through? And the win of that is having these moments. Like I had several moments when I was doing that mirror practice alongside of you where I was just like full body laughing until I was crying. And it was just this deep sense of joy of like, I get to be me. Like that's not something I've gotten to feel in over 20 years until recently with the healing work I've done and the modalities I've created and then now teach through my business. Like I get to feel like me. And that is like I wish there were other words to describe that. The English language doesn't do it justice, but the capacity to get to feel like yourself and just be so dropped into your body and feel just that deep sense of bliss and ease. And it's like a fulfillment and a satisfaction just from existing because you get to be yourself. And that's a feeling that nobody else will ever know. And nothing else can ever take away from you once you've fully dropped into it. Like nothing else can touch that. Like no matter what else is going on, I get to feel like myself when I haven't gotten to have that in over 2 decades. And that is the greatest win of a lifetime. So that's my win and challenge.
That's amazing. We very much feel like it, and all of your bubbly energy and your beautiful smile, like really, I feel like it shows like how much you've come through. Do you feel like you have like inner or outer, well, I suppose with outer things that have changed that can showcase that big depth of change that you've gone through? Like what were you like before?
um, yeah. That's a whole thing. um, Before the healing, it was like I mean, it depends what time period, because there was a lot of different stages where different problems were more prevalent. But in relationships is a really obvious one. My past self was always having a lot of really unhealthy relationships. And it was a lot of codependency with friendships. It was a lot of manipulation with romantic partners. It was a lot of, I mean, those are the big ones, but just not really having an identity, being alone and having to always be around people and then kind of like blending with whoever they happen to be and not really having a self that was distinct from that. And then on the flip side of that, like constantly needing to be around people because there was no self without it. And so it was this kind of codependency. And yeah, relationships is definitely a big one. And holding on to trauma stories was a huge thing. My past self was always stuck in the story, always stuck in like, these things happen to me and it defines me and I'll never break free from it. And it really took over her reality inside and out. Like it just became her whole world and her whole identity. Speaking in the third person about my past self, her whole identity was defined by trauma. And there really was no potential experience that wasn't related with trauma. And mental and emotional health were really, really bad. And all of this started from a very young age. And so her mind was just constantly like overwhelmed by stuff. Like there was always like a million thoughts going on and it was never quiet. And so in contrast, now my relationships are really healthy and I stand very independent from my relationships. And so they're a cherry on top. I don't need them in order to be okay. I don't need those relationships or that time with people to be okay. Like I actually really didn't have much of a social life for like 8 full years. And in that time, I did over 15,000 hours, depends if you count a couple of years of it, 10, 15,000 hours of mirror practices. And a lot of those were full body nude of learning to reassociate with myself and getting to have that space of learning to be everything that I needed. So I wasn't constantly seeking that outside of me. And my mind is in complete stillness all of the time. Someone asked me the other day, like, do you meditate? And I was like, honestly, no. I was meditating for 2 to 8 hours a day for half a decade in my healing. And it got to the point where I rewired my brain. So my natural state of being is a state of meditation. Like it's constantly still. Like I walk around, I'm just like surreal. I'm just like, everything's silent. Like I never got to experience that before. And now it's just my norm. And, what was the other one that I said? Trauma stories. We'll find out as we dive into it, but I feel very, very liberated from a past that was defined by decades of really complex trauma that had started at age 4. Like before there even was a self, there was gnarly trauma that defined the entire way the brain, the body, the subconscious developed. And there really wasn't a chance to break free from that. And for the first time, I really feel like I have the power to write the story of who I am and what life I am creating. And it has nothing to do with anything I've been through. And so to be able to look at it and talk about it and be like, yeah, that happened. And also, I don't feel it in my body anymore. Like it's a very embodied state of liberation where I'm not back reliving that past stuff because I've alchemized the depths of the body memories that had gotten stuck from it all and rewritten the story of who I am in relation with my life experience. The list goes on and on. Those are just like a couple things of how things have been different from before to after the healing.
That's incredible for sure. I feel like I got to that point where everything was silent and I was just as shocked as you for a bit. But now, as I've gone through a little contraction, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So now we're going to go back into the mirror practice all the time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah, recently I did learn that, like, more about the nervous system, and I would love for you to tell us more about it. It really was reassuring to know that you don't have to do the practices for forever. In a way, you kind of just come back from that too hot, too cold state, and you find your just right state, kind of, and you can stay there, and it can feel very liberated. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even with like meditation, like, if you go into it thinking, I'm going to start practicing meditation and I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life, like, I'm going to actually say no. Actually, the point of meditation, I would say, is so that you can one day no longer need meditation because that'll just be your natural state of being. Similar with like some other practices and stuff, is like, mirror practices is one. Like my past self used mirrors because she didn't know that she existed otherwise. We can dive into the story a little bit and I can share more, but my past self didn't know where she existed. And she literally couldn't feel her own existence, her orientation in time and space, the fact that she existed at all without a mirror. And so that was just amazing. I would love to jump into my story. There's a fun way to tell it, and then we can go and discuss like nervous system or like anything that comes up from it. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask, do you want to like, fully introduce yourself and the work you do? We can start surface and then go all the way down.
Perfect. I love it. So I'm Kristin Windsor, a body, mind, soul mentor, and I help people return home to their innate wholeness, restore well-being within body, mind, soul, and expand to create the happily ever after that you desire in your everyday experience through empowered self-worth, joy, and inner freedom. And this is all from a journey of independently self-healing, hundreds of debilitating battles from 22 years of complex trauma, including 7 years of amnesia. Who does that? Me, apparently. And through that journey, I taught myself neuroscience, developed my own unique method of part somatic and mirror work, and was able to achieve 100% resolution without any external guidance. And this is just the evidence of the power that all of us have. Every single person listening here has the power to create that healing transformation. And so if I can heal all of that, I know that you can too. And you already have that power. It's just about tapping into the power that you already have and then having some tools that you can apply on a daily basis. And from there, the transformation you crave is inevitable. And so my journey personally starts in 2021. And this is going to be pretty interesting. So hold on to the edge of your seats. Grab your
Go
on. Oh, so in 2021, I was basically just coming out of the stages of early neurodevelopment. My brain had gone through the process of being an infant, a toddler, a child, and a teenager. And the neurodevelopmental processes that first form your brain and your body were just being completed. And this is in 2021. And in that, my left and right brain hemispheres were totally separate from each other, and they were just starting to gain reconnection with each other. My past self, at that point, I could not recognize myself in a mirror. I couldn't recognize the sound of my own voice. I'd look down and see my hands and be like, I'm so confused. This is not my body. I'm not in my body. I don't recognize my body. Had no association with the name Kristin, and had been, at that point, there had been 5 years where my brain could not form new personal memories. And so your capacity to say, yeah, I did this thing with Susie last week and it was so much fun, that wasn't existing. That neurobiological ability did not exist in my brain for 5 years because of all the complex trauma. And at this point, I could not remember my entire life either. So I had no memories and no capacity to remember anything day to day as well. And it was just coming out of this really intense healing. And I had the opportunity to say, I get to create who I am. Like if you're coming out of just like brain, like the edges of brain development, and I'll explain why that was happening in a minute.
Yeah.
Cliffhanger. Was coming out of that, just that my brain wasn't supporting my existence. And I had the opportunity to say, I get to write who I am. I get to build my brain how I want it to work. I get to reassociate with my body and choose who I am. And so I chose that as an opportunity. And that's really the beginning of my story because my memory reset itself. And so everything from 2021 on is what I feel a deep association with the who that I am right here, right now. And so before that, to recap a long story, early childhood trauma at age 4 had gotten stuck and suppressed in the body and surfaced all these really, really gnarly symptoms by ages 9 and 10, which had become debilitating by age 14. And 10 years later, hadn't found any help for it. There had been a lot of other traumas, sexual assaults, physical assaults, gnarly stuff that had been going on. And it led to debilitating battles. My past self was in mental health care treatments with therapists, psychiatrists, trauma treatments, all this stuff for 10 years, saw over 100 doctors, and was worse off than ever before. Never found answers, never found healing, never found relief from her symptoms, never found hope that total resolution of the battles was even possible. And in that journey felt very defined by all these struggles that nobody seemed to understand. And with that, there was really gnarly psychosis and dissociation and this really intense stuff going on. And so finally, in 2017, my past self was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, which is if you look at like all of the things you could possibly experience, it's considered one of the most intense and misunderstood, the most gnarly and can be debilitating battles when flowing with mental health and those things. And was like, okay, so now I have this insight, but what does that actually mean? And all the doctors were like, I don't know. I don't know, basically. Like, you know, they pretend they do, but they didn't know. They had no idea what it actually meant or what to do to help heal. And the things they were trying was not working, understatement. And then it was around that time, there was more traumas. My brain lost the ability to form new memories, and it was terrifying. And at that point, my past self had been consistently, with great determination, repeatedly attempting suicide. She was like, I'm done. Can't do this. Checked out. Peace out. This isn't for me. This life stuff ain't working. Bye. And thankfully, didn't work. But for 10 years, suicide attempts were very chronic, along with like every other battle in the book: anxiety, panic attacks, depression, bipolar, insomnia, night terrors, PTSD, complex PTSD, all these different experiences, and self-harm, substance abuse. The list is endless. And so all these other traumas, this diagnosis that doesn't make any sense, nobody has answers, brain loses the capacity to form new memories, and health just gets worse and worse and worse. And the trauma responses, all of the things that had compounded, because it's not just mental, right? It's not just mental health. Your mind comes from your brain, your body, your actual physical being. And so a lot of physical health battles that came on top of that, including like tachycardia, bradycardia, just really intense issues with heart rate and breath rate, respiration. Oxygen deprivation was one of the things that was going on from chronic fold stress responses. So my past self was on oxygen tubes every hour of every day for many years and couldn't form new memories. And there was a massive level of division or fragmentation in how my past self was able to access her inner parts. And so there was 20 separate states of self that had amnesic barriers. And several of those were age regressive states of consciousness, which means the brain, the body, and the subconscious reverted to stages of early childhood from when that suppressed trauma had happened at age 4. It was really horrific sexual violence that had gone on at age 4. And that had led to these age regressive states. And so the brain and the body would go back, and the sound of the voice, how tall the body felt like it was, the capacity to associate and communicate was all reverting to age 4 when that really gnarly trauma had gotten stuck. And so there's 20 separate states of self. I'm oxygen tubes, can't remember what happened yesterday, panic attacks that were lasting 2 hours long. I mean, the list is endless. And so needless to say, it was the definition of a living hell. Like, you can imagine what you would conceive as a living hell. Go ahead and multiply that by like 100,000, and you might be in the ballpark of the crap that was everyday existence. And I will genuinely never fully fathom it, but somehow my past self said, this is the greatest opportunity of a lifetime. This is where I reclaim my power. This is where I teach myself neuroscience. This is where I experiment with self-healing methods. This is where I change the world. This is where I build my business. This is where I start helping clients. This is where I get to be the change that I have wanted to experience my entire life, but it never felt possible. And so here at the peak of impossibility is where I get to make that happen. I get to be that. And so my past self showed up every single day for her healing and her business. That was her full-time reality. Was I'm healing myself, I'm facilitating healing for others, repeat, repeat, repeat. And in that process was able to successfully heal every single battle. And it wasn't about working with the surface symptoms. It wasn't about going back into the past trauma. It was about using these neuroscience-based methods of part somatic and mirror work to rebuild and rewire and repattern and reprogram and resculpt and recreate the trillions and quadrillions of energy pathways in the brain and the body to make new patterns of how this vessel navigates and self-regulates. And that was, so developed all that. And so got to the edge of it, was like, I did it. I healed it. No more anxiety, no more insomnia, no more PTSD, no more amnesic barriers between parts of self, like no more this, that. I can get off oxygen tubes, like total healing. in 2020 was when that finally concluded. It was the gnarliest year imaginable. Other people are like, it was gnarly because of COVID. I'm like, oh, it was gnarly because I was healing split brain hemispheres and oxygen deprivation and all this. And so then came 2021, and it was like, I did it. Like, I healed myself. I'm good. Like, there's no more age regression. That my like I can almost, like, I have some form of memory of what happened yesterday. There's no more, long list of symptoms. And it was at that point where I was like, I can't recognize myself in a mirror though. Wait, who am I? Oh, wait, I actually can't remember my entire life. Are you supposed to have memories of what happened before now? I didn't even realize that it actually took 3 months to realize that was missing
Mm.
because it was just so normal. Didn't even know about it. And so that was when it came out of the early stages of neurodevelopment. And so my brain body literally went through infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, and teenagehood, because those age regressive states of consciousness, once their core trauma was processed, had to go through the halted neurodevelopment that had gotten stuck at a young age. And then I came out of that being able to form memories for the first time in 5 years and not remembering my life, and having brain hemispheres that were starting to connect for the first time and learning to breathe for the first time. And so I reframe that story and I say I was literally reborn. It is the greatest evolution of death and rebirth, because it's literally like, if you come out of childhood, right? Like, you don't have an identity when you're coming from childhood. Like, your sense of self hasn't formed yet when you're 4 years old. You're just learning how to walk and talk. You don't recognize yourself in a mirror when you're 4 years old. You're learning to do that, right? That's why kids, anytime you take a picture or video, they're like, can I see? Can I see? Because they're learning how to associate with themselves for the first time. And I was basically at that stage of my life, but here just a few years ago as a grown woman. And so I decided to embrace that as an opportunity. And I said, great, awesome. I have the chance to rebuild my brain however I want it to be built, right? It doesn't have to be built based on these past experiences. I get to choose how it's rewired. I get to choose my identity. I get to choose how to associate with myself. This gets to be the greatest thing that ever happened for me. And that radical reframe to be the creator of your reality and not the victim of your reality is so empowering. And so from there, just finished up that healing. And through the part somatic and mirror work practices that I do, I was able to heal all that amnesia. I can remember my life. But the most astounding thing is that I never worked with any past memories to do that. I was just naturally gaining them back while doing the specific modality that I lead my one-on-one clients through. And it's the same way I was able to heal all those symptoms from all those traumas without working with the symptoms or the traumas at all. And so that's my story. And that's why I'm excited to be here.
What a freaking roller coaster. My God. I'm impressed. Like, you deserve like a standing ovation every time you tell that story. Wow. Okay. There's so much I want to unpack, but like, you already unpacked so much of it. I feel like I'm curious when I know that, like, okay, so you stood up and you were like, I'm not healing this anymore. This is happening. I'm working on this. I'm going to change the world. That was at a stage when you had amnesia though. So how was that happening? If you couldn't remember yesterday and you were learning, I'm curious, what did you learn about what your neuroscience, what your brain was doing?
Yeah. And it's still mind blowing to even reflect now that I can have autobiographical memories again. So there is a specific damage to the hippocampus that blocked the formation of new conscious memories. Mm-hmm. But with this very unique type of brain damage, my body was still able to record unconscious memories, which are the muscle memories of when you like memorize something, like when you retrieve information and you're like integrating it into application. You're not just remembering a fact, and you're not just like remembering the experience of when you learned it. It feels like muscle memory, like it's instinctive, like it's just something you know, and maybe you don't even know how you know it, right? Like handwriting, for example. Like, you might not remember when you first learned to write letters, right? But it's just an instinctive muscle memory. So the ability to form those unconscious memories was actually still there. And so one thing that my past self did was have a very structured day. And so when you lose the ability to form new memories, there's no sense of time, because your ability to recognize time is because you remembered that there was a yesterday and a last week and a last month and a last year. And then your brain and your body are like, I understand that there's a tomorrow and a next week and a next month and a next year. And so that ability was completely gone. And it was this very surrendered state of there's only ever now, and I'm going to work with every now that I have, no matter what. And so to work with that loss of orientation and time and space, my past self had a very structured day of, it's during these hours that I'm doing this. And by having that structured schedule, the body was kind of able to have a tracking of time, because it was repeating the same type of task in the same location at the same time every day. And that's how she structured her business and her healing. And then within that, there was this miraculous opportunity to work within parts of self in a new way and build a trusting relationship within the self. And so sometimes there was, let's see, what was one of the things she did? Okay, this is an example. So there was a point where my past self, I call her my inner evolutionary hero. She will go in and she's doing her neuroscience research. She has this stack of books. She has her coping tools to stay grounded because of all the dissociation when she's trying to read and stuff. And she's getting ready to nestle in. And this is one of the memories I was able to retrieve and integrate through the process, even though I wasn't working with memory. So that's pretty epic. And so she's sitting in her little safe space and she opens up this book and she sees her handwritten notes, all colorful and organized and highlighted pages. And immediately her heart starts to race with a panic attack and sweat starts dripping down her body. And she almost has like blurred vision and just like all these body responses. And it's this full body fear and anxiety and terror. And it was because she didn't remember writing that. She didn't remember ever opening the book before. She didn't remember reading it before. And she's like, how is my handwriting in a book I've never read? And it was the most terrifying thing ever. And so this was when she started to do the method of parts work that I use in my own life. As you'll notice, I talk about her in the third person, and something that I teach my clients. And there's different ways to use it. And it's never about like ostracizing the self. Like I don't talk about my past self in the third person because like I'm disassociated from her and I'm not connected and she's like this separate being. It's because she's not the same version of me that I am now, but I have a really great relationship with her. My past self and I are really close. We're just very different persons because she was at a different stage of her life than I am. She was living in a brain and body that was wired very differently. She didn't know the things that I know now because I know what she learned, right? And so it's a distinction and connection is what really allows for the parts work to be really effective. And it can really create neurophysiological shifts, not just like cognitive shifts in your mind. And so in that moment of opening up that book and seeing all of this handwriting and all these notes, there's a choice, right? Like we always have a choice. Like my past self wasn't choosing to have all these health battles, but she got to choose how she responded to it. And so in that moment, she said, okay, I can choose to be really pissed off and scared and frustrated. I can choose to tell a victim story of how much this fucking sucks, that I can't recognize this. I don't remember this. This is so frustrating. It's infuriating. The medical system has let me down for 10 years. Humanity has let me down for 20 years. There's been all this trauma. Like this is impossible. I can't even remember what happened an hour ago. How am I supposed to learn how to heal myself when no one else could figure this out? Like it would be so easy to go into that. But she's like, wait a second, I've been doing this reclaiming personal power thing for a hot minute. And I know that there's a choice to do something different. So she said, or I can say, wow, this is so fascinating. How interesting. I'm going to get curious about this. How interesting that there's all of these notes that I don't remember writing. How interesting that there's all of this progress being made that I don't even remember happening. And so when she would have that, she would start this practice of saying, wow, thank you, past self, for writing all these notes. Like I'm going to read them for the very first time. And I'm so excited about that. Mm-hmm. And it was this very powerful shift of like, wow, my past self yesterday did stuff for me. And now I get to be here and read these notes and learn from her. And so even though from day to day there wasn't a unified self that had connection, every day that part of self was having a relationship with the self that was there the previous day, even though there was no memory of that. And so the learning journey of teaching neuroscience and part somatic mirror work and stuff, it was very gradual, and books were read many times, but by showing up consistently, it was teaching the body information that it could pull from, even though the mind couldn't remember it. And so my past self would, be recording videos. She shared over 3,000 hours of videos online in her journey of all her case study work and self-healing and the progress she's making. And so she'd go in to like record these videos, and she'd find that she was just kind of saying things that she didn't know how she knew them. She's like, yeah, and then the polyvagal theory, and then this method of brain spotting. And then she'd be like, wait, when did I learn about that? And there was like a self-doubt of like, this might not be accurate. Like, do note that I am like living with amnesia. So like, I can't fully trust that this is accurate. So she would go back and rewatch the videos, not having memory of speaking them, not having memory of learning the stuff that she was talking about. And she would compare it with the notes in the books. And she was like mind blown at the accuracy and the precision. And so my body was able to gain patterns of procedural memories, which is that muscle memory type instinctive information. And by showing up in that level of consistency, my past self did not miss a single day in the journey. She showed up every single day to read these books and do these practices and show up for the meditation, which is why I don't need meditation anymore, and everything. And by doing that consistently and showing up, the body was able to learn new information, even though the mind didn't know that it was learning it, basically.
It's so fascinating. Has your journey been mirrored to the movie Memento before? Because that's what it's
I
reminding me.
actually haven't seen that movie, but I've heard that it has correlations with
Oh
the
yeah, you just learn like leaving yourself notes and then not being like fully aware that it was you. It's really interesting. I was just adding that visual and I could see you reading the books and I was like, oh my God, I can see all of this happening. And it makes so much sense. So then like anyone should be able to learn that way, or maybe should be learning that way, I suppose. Like if you want to learn anything into muscle memory, really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so interesting. So how did you keep up with the schedule? Was like, and like how was your family at this point in time? Was your family supporting you through this and there maybe to help you keep timing, or just terrified?
So So that's a really interesting journey. So I love my family, and I am very grateful for them. Before this part of the healing, where lost the ability to form new memories and stuff, they didn't understand mental health. They didn't understand it, and because they didn't understand it, there wasn't room for compassion or validation of any of the struggles that have been going on. And so the battles had started as a child, and it was kind of just like, you're on your own, like good luck, like we don't get it. Right. And then teenagehood, it was, a lot of criticism, if you will, about the behavior patterns of my teenage self, because my past self was struggling and it just wasn't understood. And then in college and after college, continued battles, and it was, affecting life choices and relationships and all these things. And there just wasn't an understanding. And it led to a lot of disruptions with the relationships with family. I had mentioned the relationships was like a huge thing that was not so good for my past self, and that was family included. It was really not the healthiest on both ends of things. And it was there just wasn't an understanding of what was going on. And so 1 year after the brain lost the ability to form new memories is when my past self moved back to the family farm to receive the support that was needed, after multiple other traumas had happened. And it was just a really, really bad, like, definition of rock bottom level, in 2018. My past self was like, I need to come back. Like I have nowhere else to go. I have nothing else I can do. And that was even after exhausting like the mental health treatment, like checking herself into like psych wards and stuff. Like it was really, really bad. And so my past self came back, and my family was absolutely amazing to hold space, for my past self to live in that home, and to have a separate little room that she could be in. but that was really kind of it. They still had no understanding of what was going on or how to be there or how to support. And there wasn't really a lot of conversations about like, so what are you going through and how are you doing today? Like that was never a thing. So there really wasn't any like mental, emotional support relationally. But they did provide a safe space for my past self to form her own healing journey. And so my past self had her own setup, did everything on her own in terms of like, I'm waking up and I'm, going to this space of the property and I'm going to be reading this pile of books and then I'm doing this meditation and then I've got these client calls and then I'm showing up for this Patreon platform, which is one of her things that she had in her business then, supporting her case study. And so she had everything structured, and there wasn't much support in that, but it was just the opportunity to really reclaim power in a great way.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's wild. And so were you in that home when you went through, you said it was regression, when you went through being a child and a teenager, which is the opposite, like building yourself back up? Did they witness that and kind of clearly not understand that? But like, what was that like for all of you?
They were around it, but my past self really spent most of her time alone. We just got into nature, sometimes go out into the hiking trails in the hills for like a full 10 hours and just do her reading or meditations, go hiking for half the time, have a picnic, and do work projects and stuff. So it was a lot of just being alone, and that was really needed, because being around family is very activating, or triggering for age regression, because the second that there's stimulus from childhood, the age regressive parts really come forward, and that can really make it challenging to function when you're living with that. And so, yeah, it was a very interesting and challenging time.
It's fascinating. I think everyone experiences that maybe to a degree. When you go home, you become like your child self. So maybe we can
Right.
relate in that way. But
Yeah.
I can only imagine. So did you know you were going through this like growth journey of like specific teenage years and decades of your life, is that from looking back you realized what was happening?
That's a great question. It was a little of both. There'd been a lot of uh, researching and defining age regression, a lot of neuroscience based discoveries that aren't really known about or talked about. And so during it was, there was some awareness of it, based on neurobiological activity, certain capacities of the brain and the body that correlate with stages of neurodevelopment, certain activity of habitual patterns and the patterns of your choices and your habits and behaviors that really obviously stemmed from certain time periods. Like, oh, this is very clearly the behavioral pattern of my 5-year-old self. Hi, little 5-year-old self. I guess we're hanging out for a couple months until you start to neurobiologically grow up. Like, what's up, baby girl? And then it was really interesting to transition to like ages 11, 12. And it was really, really fascinating looking back a year later, once it was like over and done and new memories could start to be formed and stuff, to look back. There was a repeat of patterns. And so in my original childhood, they, my precious, angelic, heavenly, divine, miraculously perfect childhood self wrote songs. She wrote songs, and so she had this whole book of songs that she wrote, and that was something that was really precious for my childhood self. And so when it hit the point of my age regression, going through the halted stages of neurodevelopment, try and get this right, it's still a little hard to talk about, but it's good to talk about too. um, then she repeated the pattern of songwriting. And so there was like 3 months in 2020 where my past self was writing songs, and it was all mirroring the habitual movement patterns of the body of songwriting from childhood. And it
Mm.
was mind blowing, because those are the most incredible songs I've ever heard in my life. I can't write music like that. But because my past self in 2020 was going through age regression and really intense right brain hemisphere imbalance, she was able to string together like she thought in music almost. And so it's just really interesting because I love the songs that she wrote, and I cannot write music like that now because I'm in a different brain and body. But there was all these different patterns of things that had happened, or habitual patterns from childhood that kind of went through a repeat pattern as the brain went through that stage of neurodevelopment. And then once it was complete, the habits shifted and it went through all of those in order: the infancy, toddlerhood, childhood, and teenagehood in 2020.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. It's
Yeah.
so cool that you're writing and like that you are tapping into that right brain. Do you think from everything, do you think it's possible for adults to just like kind of tap into one side of their brain at some stage and like intentionally?
Yes. Several of the practices that I teach are actually to support that, mainly in bringing balance back if there's an imbalance. But if you wanted to use it to like more tap into one side, you definitely can. It's just a matter of getting to know the properties of those brain regions and then what kind of activities can ignite that, basically. And
Mhm.
so, like, for example, your right brain is all about the feeling of experience, is very visual oriented, very emotional, very living in the present moment without like a past or a future, like not necessarily goals and ambitions, but it's about how you feel right here, right now. And so if I have a day where I'm really tired and I'm just like, I really just want to like watch a movie or like binge watch a series or something like that. It happens pretty rarely, but on the occasion it does. I find myself slipping into more of a right brain state. And so by the end of it, I'm thinking in images and feelings more than narrated thoughts. And that's a sign of right brain activity. And similarly, if I have a day where I'm like, I'm getting stuff done, like I'm writing my book, I'm doing 20 minutes of focus, 5-minute break, and it's like structured, and I'm typing and I'm organizing my thoughts and words, like that's all left brain. And then
Mhm.
by the end of the day, it's so left brain that I can have a sense of almost being really emotionally detached, which is left brain hemisphere, because emotions are all right brain. And so depending on how you use your time and your energy every day, there's going to be more or less activity in one or the other. And if you intentionally want to like sway one way, just fill it with more of those activities.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, love that. I think I tend to sway more towards the right as much as I can.
it's it's a more enjoyable space to be. It's like life is more lively and colors are brighter and there's more like visual depth to the things you see, and like you feel so many sensations in your body and stuff. But then if you get to a point where you're like super in your right brain and you're like, I have goals, I have ambitions, I need to get organized and structured, like I need to be emotionally detached so I can just focus on like, you know what I mean? Like it can be really hard because the
Yeah.
right brain's like, I don't have any skills for that. And so like having that like integrated connection where you can like evenly flow is something that I support my clients with, because it's like a very deep integrative process and like really getting to like rebirth your identity and make some new styles of connections in the brain hemispheres.
That's so beautiful. Do you think like learning obviously how your brain works, but then like kind of feeling into all of those sensations helped you heal, I suppose, and then connect back to your body as well? And like you just knew what was happening after reading all of that. Does that make
Yeah, so the what really was the game changer, and again, this is what I'm ecstatic to teach my one-on-one clients. If anyone's interested, you can check out my work. But is the first step is really getting to understand yourself, and that's where I use body, mind, soul treasure maps. Something you'll see all over my work if you go explore any of it. And through that, it's a way to understand 25 regions of body, mind, and soul through neuroscience, consciousness, and infinite love. And from that, you can differentiate your identity from your experience and then have power to anchor into your true self, that identity, and then really understand the experience. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I felt overwhelmed because my left brain wasn't fully engaged to have this organized structure. And so my right brain was operating kind of independently of that left brain. And then that activated this free stress response in my nervous system, which disrupted my neurochemicals and then shut down my prefrontal cortex. So I didn't have this awareness. And then there's dysregulation. So I couldn't tell if I was hungry or thirsty. And then my body was freaking out. And like you can like trace the things back, and just that first step of being like, I get it. Like there's something that clicks where you can feel very empowered by understanding it. Like my past self felt very disempowered because it was like, there's all this stuff going on. I don't know what's happening and I don't know what to do about it. And the moment that she was like, there's a reason that I'm feeling this. There's a reason that this thought is happening. Like there's a reason that I'm struggling, and I can neuroscientifically explain it. That was like so many shifts of like feeling empowered for the first time in decades. And then part of the parts work is differentiating your identity from your experience. And so understanding that those experiences, those sensations, the thoughts, the emotions, the responses have nothing to do with the aspects of your true self. Those aspects of self, yeah, they're experiencing that, but all of that's coming from the brain and the body, right? The self is not the same thing. And when you start to like recognize those aspects of self for who they are and not what they're experiencing, then your body mind kind of opens up to change. Whereas when you feel like, oh well, that is those parts of me, right? Like the part of me being frustrated, there's a part of me being this, there's a part of me who's hyperventilating right now. Like no, that's actually a part of your nervous system, that's a part of your brain, that's a part of your body, that's not a part of yourself. Yourself is distinct. And so having that power is like game changer. And then once you have that understanding, then it's how can I have simple, accessible daily practices that can help heal that root cause, reconnect me with my true self, and leave me feeling nourished and empowered. And then when you can create a couple practices for each thing you're trying to like heal or resolve, or you're wanting to expand into, then you have this empowerment and it builds momentum, right? Like you show up once, you're like, okay, I feel a little less anxious. I feel a little more present, right? And then you show up again and you're like, okay, I think I can eat food and smile about it because I'm not so stressed out. Okay, next day, wow, I slept a little bit better. So now I feel a little clear, right? And then it builds and it builds and it builds. And as you notice those positive shifts, then you're empowered to keep showing up, right? Like if you show up and you're like, nothing's working, nothing's changing, this sucks, like I'm still stuck, you're not going to like want to keep going, right? But once you see it feels good and it's actually creating the shifts and it's something sustainable, it's something you can keep showing up for because it's practices integrated into your everyday life, or 15 minutes in the morning and the evening, and it's very doable, then you're empowered to keep going. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That sounds amazing. I feel like everyone should do that. 100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So yeah, understanding the sensations and feeling into them, but then having these practices to move through them and not just like stay stuck in the stories or the sensations is really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's making your mind like your friend as well, but also not part of your identity. That sounds really appealing.
Yeah.
Something that people don't think about. And then what you said about parts work, it's interesting. Like there's a correlation to parts work. It's always that like integrating the parts of yourselves to become one, the parts that like drifted apart, and yours is a very different perspective on that. So fascinating. Yeah. Okay, I love that. So I feel like that's even like a very distinct different way that you do everything than other people do. Is there like other, like what's some of the biggest myths in like trauma healing that you would want to like just squash from your experiences?
Oh my goodness, get me started on that.
Throw it out there.
I think the biggest, most blatant one is thinking that you have to go back into the past to heal it.
Yeah.
And the truth is you don't. And the reason for this is also something people don't necessarily understand. And even a lot of healers or facilitators don't fully understand. And it's the reason that you don't need to go back into the past. And it's not bypassing, to be clear. Like, you're not just like, oh yeah, I'm just never going to go back there. Like, we're just forever moving on. Just bye. Like, you're not just like abandoning those parts of you, right? The reason you don't need to go back into the past to heal it is because there is no past. There's only your present inner realities. Okay. The past that we think that we has to be healed is stored inside of the brain and the body. And we want to heal it because it's affecting us in the present, right? That's like really the reason if you like reframe it. And so neuroscience discovered that memories do not exist to store the past. Like neurobiologically, your brain and your body storing all these memories from all your life doesn't care about the past, doesn't care about what's ever happened. The purpose of memories is to provide navigation in present and potential experiences. And so when you wake up and you're able to recognize where you are, you're able to recognize the people you're around, you're able to remember the project that you were doing, you're able to think back to, yeah, I had these experiences 10 years ago and that thing inspired my passion for this, right? It's all trying to help you navigate your present and potential experiences.
Yeah.
And the majority of memories exist unconsciously. And so if you try to work with memories consciously, you're reaching into the surface level. You're reaching into the autobiographical stories, but that's not what's causing any disruptions of well-being. The disruption of well-being come from the unconscious memories. And so no matter how much you go back into the past and you dig up the stories and you talk about the details and you do the work to rewrite the pattern, you're usually still not touching on the majority of the memories from it. And those unconscious memories hold patterns of feeling and patterns of movement, which affect your emotions and your choices. And so all the stuff we want to heal usually has to do with patterns of how we're feeling and the way that we're making choices or behavior patterns or habits and stuff like that, right? And the emotions in the process of that. Feeling and movement is a core foundation of what we experience every day. And so when you go back into the past, you're missing the purpose of memories and why they exist. You're abandoning the power you have in the present to influence your present brain body wiring by, running into these past stories and being like, wait, but I'm not grounded in my body. Oh, but I'm healing this past trauma, so we win. You can only heal if you're really grounded in the present. And the more you go back into the past, usually the more you dissociate from the present, and it can activate old stress responses, which then dysregulates your nervous system in the present, and then you have less power to do healing. And when you're trying to go back into the past, you're not usually, there are some methods that do this when effectively applied, but they're not the most common. And so in a generalized sense, usually you're not able to fully reach into those unconscious memories that hold the emotions and the sensations or responses in your body from past traumas or any unpleasant or challenging life experience that might now negatively affect the way you connect with your life experience, right? And so healing from the past is really about rewiring the present patterns inside of your brain and your body. That's probably the biggest one. Is bust through the ceiling.
Yeah, that's huge. So it's essentially using what happened in the past to kind of like, if you're about to take similar steps, then it'll be like, oh, this is what we did last time. This is how we'll react like from what we did last time. Is that what's kind of you need to break that pattern?
Yeah. So when you're in a present moment, you might have an emotional response to someone or something. You might have a body response where you reach for food or you reach for a phone and you're scrolling or you're reaching, right? Some kind of pattern of habit or behavior or reaction or emotion. Those are primarily coming from memories. And so it's not an obvious thing of, oh, this is a habit or a pattern from the past that I need to break. It's just your present personality, quote unquote. It's usually just what you experience as your present personality is coming from the unconscious memories. And so when you think I have to go back into the past and, heal this experience where I was very abandoned by this person who was supposed to take care of me or, whatever it might be, what you really want to be doing is rewriting how your brain and your body have learned to navigate your identity and your experience.
It's amazing. Okay. I'm just digesting that for a moment. Amazing. I love that. Okay. So is there anything else that you would want to change about how people approach this?
Another big one is looking at surface symptoms from the lens of psychology without looking at the root cause from neuroscience is another huge one. All of those years in failed treatments was because people were in detail looking at the surface symptoms and the past traumas and saying, okay, you've got all these surface symptoms, you've got all these past traumas. We're going to understand this from the psychological lens of the mind. And that's going to be the place that we try to create healing from. And so obviously healing didn't work because they never got deeper than that. And when you look at the root cause rooted in neuroscience, then you're not saying, oh, well, you feel, these sensations. It's, oh, well, there's like the example I shared earlier, there's these actual like patterns in your brain and your body, and like these regions of your brain that have a certain job, but they're overactive or they're underactive, or they're not integrated and able to connect, or they're dysregulated, or there's these patterns where they're not firing the way they're meant to. And when you realize that your brain and your body are actually being rewired in every moment, it's not just like, let's look at this surface symptom and these past traumas and try to like manipulate change from the mind and like psychoanalyze. Like, you can just take all of that and just throw it out the window and never look at it ever again, and you'll be better off. Truth is, you can just go in and say, okay, let's understand the neuroscience of the brain and the body and look at the root cause of what precedes the surface symptoms and what is storing the past traumas as present patterns of navigation and regulation. And so when you can go in there from that neuroscience lens, get to that root cause, then you can have body-based or somatic work that can actually go in and rewire the neural networks, the body memories, the nervous systems, the brain hemispheres, the neurochemical patterns. One of the big changes is that, my past self was on all of these psychiatric medications. At one point, she was taking I think like 4D pills a day or something like ridiculous. Or no, she tried 40 different things. And at one point, I think she was taking like 16 pills a day or something, like big numbers, and nobody should ever be pumped into the body. And it was all this attempt to like manipulate your neurochemicals, right? And so my past self was actually able to have these practices where you can manipulate and influence and consciously affect your neurochemicals and choose to increase your serotonin by doing these practices, and choose to increase your oxytocin and your dopamine and lower your cortisol and lower the adrenaline and like all the different things to bring about that stabilization in a very holistic way.
That's fascinating. So would you recommend that people learn neuroscience, the ones that are interested, I suppose, and then to tackle it from that space? It does feel like a very empowering thing to like know all the way to the root.
Yeah, it's definitely very empowering. And the best way, yes, I think it's very helpful, or minimally to work with someone who comes from a lens of understanding it, because quite frankly, it's a lot and it can be very overwhelming and daunting of like, how do I learn all this and how do I apply it? And so even if you're able to work with someone, if you're, working with a mentor or somebody who has the understanding of neuroscience, who can say, oh, this is a stress response from this state of the nervous system. It's tied with this region of body memories. And there's the potential of this brain hemisphere imbalance. Like, what you need is this, and this practices to help rewire and re-regulate that. That's really powerful. And for those who might be curious, I do have a new training where I use my body, mind, soul treasure maps, and we go into like everything you kind of need to know up front about neuroscience to understand your experience. So explore 5 states of the autonomic nervous system in relation with the polyvagal theory, the brain hemispheres, the mind-body connection, the triune brain, your neural networks, your body memories, like all of the magic. It's a really powerful overview, and it uses the concepts that I've talked about here, where you're distinguishing the aspects of self from parts of the body mind.
That's amazing. I definitely need to dive into that. Could we, though, also potentially get a list of the books that you've learned from? That's just a me thing.
Definitely. I would have to look those up because I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do have a book cited reference that I can totally share, and you can link it to the show notes.
That would be awesome. Yeah. I think some of us are book nerds that would love to dive into that.
Yeah,
I've tried very much to learn this, and then I never found any really resources that like you can resonate with and you understand and you can tie it back to real life. So and possibly, or like definitely using your resources and then maybe diving in after would create more of a body mind full connection in between all of the experience. So that would be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was a great challenge of the journey, because a lot of what I know now wasn't directly learned from specific sources. It was really learning about neuroscience and then doing a lot of like piecing together the dots through a 20,000 hour self-led case study. And that's what those like 3,000 hours of like shared videos online was going into, and kind of creating like a new lens to understand it. But definitely I'll share some of the books that we dove into, and definitely worth exploring for sure.
It's amazing. So are your videos still on Patreon? That that journey could
Yes,
do
Patreon
you
still
look at it
have
now and go, oh God.
cringe. um, yeah, quite a bit, but those are all private. That's a paid subscription. There
Yeah.
are still a lot of free videos as well on my YouTube channel. Has a lot of different videos from the many years of healing, and there's case study work. A lot of that is still freely available on YouTube, and then my whole private library is still on Patreon.
Yeah, wow, amazing. So were you able to share all of that because you were just like, I don't care like how bad or cringe this is. I need to just share this with the world because it's gonna change everything.
Yeah, and it was also half of it was really from a purpose of like, I know that there's other people experiencing this, and if, they can share this journey and be supported in that in some way, like that's important. And the other half was it was just a really wonderful way to chronicle the journey that couldn't be remembered. And so it was really a consistent reference point of like, what was I doing last month? Let me go look at my video library and look up videos from those dates and see what was going on and see if I can piece stuff together. So it became a
Mhm.
really helpful tool for the living with and then healing from amnesia, as well as I'm going to share this because I know there's millions of people going through this right now. And if what I share can be of service, then that's really important.
Yeah, 100%. And that would teach you, like you would learn faster maybe from that teaching as well. That's a very back
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, teaching and verbally expressing it and then rewatching the videos as they were shared really helped integrate everything that was being learned and discovered and observed and stuff as well, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I feel like you mentioned last time we talked or something, it was about how personal transformation isn't just about or isn't just personal, it's about like healing generational trauma as well. Like what does that look like in practice or why do you believe that?
So the patterns that we experience now, so we learn how to navigate our life, right? Like when you're a toddler, a young child, there's not an instinctive patterns of thought and belief and emotional responses and behaviors and choices. Like those are learned, and those are learned through relational experiences within the societal structure. And so those have kind of been passed down from generation, where the habits that a lot of people learn now, that's not like a brand new habit that no one's ever had, right? Like it's a habit that was like culturally learned. You might call it like societal programming, if you will. And those are the things, the thought patterns, the patterns of self-talk or emotional responses or the relationship patterns, whatever it is that these, we've had many generations. And then the way that we, heal and self-regulate and treat the body and respond to the mind and just like the basic way of existing, those are patterns that have been learned and passed down. And with that, when there are traumas, there's been a chronic response of dismissing it and not healing and normalizing it. Well, yeah, it's normal. Like when my past self had gone through sexual assault at age 18, she went to a grandmother within the family and explained that this thing had happened. And the grandmother was like, yeah, that's really normal. That happened to me when I was a kid too, several times. Like that's just a normal part of life.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so there's the generational trauma, there's multiple facets to it. Like, I mean, you can look into how our bodies are literally, carrying information from our ancestors. But just from like even this lens is like, the way that we've learned to navigate life and regulate our nervous systems and treat our bodies and respond to our mind and process really challenging experiences and go through life and have relational experiences and navigate these choices and different things. These have been patterns that have been passed down, and every time there's a new generation, it's like you have the choice to continue repeating the patterns that you unconsciously picked up, or choose to create ones that can help evolve you and be more supportive and nourishing and empowering. And when our grandma, grandpa, great grandma, grandpa have gone through stuff, that has been an energy pattern in their body, and then they have kids and that energy pattern is still there to some degree because it came from the same cells of their body. And so when we go through this healing, there's a concept that you heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And it's by interrupting those patterns that have been there for a really long time And then just like the memories that we have right now in this one life from the past are helping us navigate our present, if we're here choosing a new pattern, then that is going to help potential future experiences, not just for us, but for the people who will come after us.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's amazing. And that felt just very twofold of like what happened to your grandma, and she felt that was normal. And then it'd be like the persecutor, or the perpetrator was also living from that same pattern. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is like looking back, it was, there's been a lot of trauma from age 4 to 24, and every person who was the cause of that trauma was actually someone who was living with their own unhealed patterns. And
Yeah.
so if their nervous system was regulated and they had healed their issues from childhood, like they would have never been the cause of trauma. And so yeah, it's very that twofold of like the people who are the reason for trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, assault, whatever it is, they have all these unconscious patterns. And if they also did the healing, and the people who have been the, in the experience of trauma do the healing, we can really resolve the reason trauma exists in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's unbelievable. I've seen like someone that had a family member that was doing that to their children, and then they had to face that reality, and then when they healed the relationship with that person, and it was just like so fascinating. And then that person went on their own healing journey, and they like kind of healed their whole family. Such a ripple. It's
Yeah.
wild. How has your journey like affected your family?
I don't know, and I don't fully feel comfortable answering that. That would be
Okay.
their perspective. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, did they, change as you changed? Does that happens even with minute change?
I'm sure there was some level of growth, but I don't necessarily see a direct correlation.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's right. If you don't want to talk about it, I'm sorry. Um, but okay, well, let's go back to, so how did you know, or like when did you even start your business? How did you know that you were like capable of starting a business, and like, this would be something that you support other people in while you were already supporting yourself through something so heavy?
Yeah. So the passion for that started years before losing the capacity to form new memories, when in the thick of healthcare treatment that was not working. And there was, my past self started a group that would meet a couple times a month for about 2.5 hours and would basically facilitate questions of self-awareness and, journal prompts and just a time to connect and go inward kind of a thing, and found a really great sense of like passion and fulfillment in that, but didn't really know like what to do with that concept, right? It was kind of just hobby, right? And then a couple years later, when things were getting more intense and she was in this like full-time like mental health treatment, she's meeting other people who was going through that and also really struggling. And she was like, I have something that can help. And so she would find these practices that could support certain people. And she was like, try this for a week, let me know how it goes. And she's like, I feel like I could like do this. Like I feel like this could be like a thing. Like I really enjoy it. And they're saying it like helps. Like this could be a thing. And then it was around that time that stuff got really bad, and there was all these other traumas and this diagnosis that didn't make sense, and the brain lost the ability to form new memories. And it was during that time that my past self started her Patreon, which is where she was really just sharing her healing journey and stuff that was helping her, and the research that she was discovering through her case study. And um sorry, I'm gonna try to move to a different room here, but I'm gonna
Oh,
keep talking. Um, and so it was during that time she started the Patreon, and then was able to be sharing stuff that she was learning in her journey. And so that was like a monthly membership kind of a thing. And then in 2018, my past self started her business of doing one-on-one coaching, and was working with an amazing mentor at the time, who was very, very supportive, and had her first one-on-one clients and her first group coaching program. And that's where it all began. And so it's really fascinating because I don't fully remember that time. Like there's not the autobiographical story of like, I totally remember starting my business, right? Like that was a very different time period and everything. But yeah, so that's where it started, and it's just grown. And there's always been a natural sense of like leadership. Like I've always had that drive of like, I really enjoy leading people and being the guide and being the one who goes first and like, okay, I've experimented with these healing methods, for the past, 4 months, 4 years, like here's what works. I'm really excited to lead you through this. I know how powerful they are. And so that's just really grown over the years.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. That really makes sense. And then now you're stepping into sharing it all in a book, which is going to be amazing.
Yes, I'm so excited. I have 5 books on Amazon right now. And that was books that were written, especially during that 2020, 2021 time period of really deep healing. And the one that I'm writing now is going to be a much bigger project. And really excited. It's going to be my whole methodology distilled, the complete trifecta treasure trove. This is an example of the body, mind, soul treasure maps, for those seeing on video. And so it's really like this powerful way to really dive deep and understand all these different parts of you and recognize clues from each region of the body mind, right? If there's like 25 regions and there's certain clues or patterns or symptoms coming up, to be able to say, okay, this is coming from this region related with this wiring of the brain, body, and subconscious, and it's connected with these aspects of myself. Okay, I do these sets of practices to help heal that specific region. And it's really getting to that root cause through body-based, neuroscience-based methods. And so it'll be a really powerful book to really become your own healer and hero.
Wow, that's fascinating. I know you were saying that you were working with people already one-on-one and going through that treasure map journey, sorry. And have you already recruited everyone, or are you starting that journey right now?
So I have spaces available. I've been doing single sessions for 6 years. And then in the past year, I've really been working diligently to distill it into like a step-by-step like pathway that can be led through in like a 6-month journey. Like, here's the magic. Your life is going to be changed. Plus you'll have the tools to keep changing your life and expanding moving forward. And so I just opened that up pretty recently. And so I do still have spaces available, if anyone's interested in exploring that. And so we go through the whole journey that I was talking about, where you kind of get to know your body, mind, soul through those regions, get to know parts of self, learn parts work, somatic work, mirror work, different eye gazing practices and mirrors. And you really get to, it's not just healing. Like you're not just resolving what's wrong. You really get to have this powerful state of liberation and meeting the truth of who you are, meeting the raw, authentic essence of your true self. Like, who would your childhood self have grown up to be if you had always known unconditional love? If you had always felt seen and loved, if you'd always felt safe and secure, if you'd always felt supported and connected, if you had always felt accepted for who you are, celebrated with importance, purpose, belonging, if you'd always felt that, who would you be right now? And you really get to meet that liberated essence of your authentic identity. And so it's so much more than just healing. It's really a profound state of expansion. But of course, you also get to resolve any disruptions of well-being in a way that can feel very enjoyable, sustainable, nourishing, and empowering. So I do have spaces available in my one-on-one multi-month mentorship. Healed and Whole is what it's called.
Beautiful. So who would that be for, if you could describe it?
Yeah. So if you are in this path and you're already devoted to your transformation, it's not just, oh yeah, there's stuff that could improve, or oh yeah, there's this stuff that's wrong. But if you're like, I'm in, like there's this stuff that's going on and I get to reclaim my power. I'm devoted to finding a path that works for me. I am dedicated to this, inner work, which also gets to have inner play. And you're really ready to reclaim your power. And you don't just want to have an outside healer facilitate healing, but you want to learn the tools to be your own healer. You want to learn the tools so that you can facilitate your own self healing, so that all the power you need to create that transformation comes from within you, because you've learned everything needed to fully embrace that power. And so, regardless of who you are, where you're at, whether you're struggling with self-doubt and insecurities, or healing from really gnarly trauma, like anything in between, it's really that space of the journey where you're ready to be your own healer. You're devoted to that transformation, and you're ready for a path that can feel really, really good while creating the change that you're desiring.
It's amazing. And you also say like you work with people or you work to create heaven on earth from within. For someone who feels far away from that, for some, if speaking to them, like where do they start with that?
Yeah. So I have a couple really, really powerful podcast episodes I highly recommend diving into. One of them is called Alchemizing a Living Hell into Heaven on Earth, because I know what it's like to be in a state where it feels like you're in a literal living hell. And at that point, living heaven on earth can sound like a joke that you scoff at. Like, yeah, that's cute, good for you. But do you see the misery I'm in? And I totally get that, because that's where my past self was for a very, very long time. Heaven on earth is the space where you start to feel unconditional self love. That's the best place to start. The moment that you can feel presence in your body and loving connection with any part of you, that is the space where heaven on earth from within can start to be birthed. And it is in that space of love and presence that you get to reconnect with the power that already lies within you. And you open these new doors to really create some empowering change beyond anything you could have dreamed possible. My past self never could have imagined being here, where like that healing journey is ancient history and I'll never have to go through that again. That was not something that felt possible at the time, but it was in the moments of saying, I am love and I am presence. And in that space, I have already won. My past self, when she was fully dissociated, she didn't know who she was, where she was. She couldn't recognize her surroundings. Like she was, living with family at a home that she had lived in for many, many, many years, like 15, 20 years throughout her life. She had no memory of ever being here before. She couldn't recognize it. She couldn't recognize her family members. She couldn't recognize herself in a mirror. She couldn't recognize her body. And so, with that level of dissociation, she would write on her arm, who am I? Love. Where am I? Presence. And that was all she needed. And so, if you're going through a really challenging time, if you can make this daily intention of, I am love and I am presence, when you are connected with that, you have already won.
That's very powerful. I feel like I'm going to use that. What a journey. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what season of life do you feel like you're in now? What are you starting? What comfort zones are you jumping out of right now?
Um, well, podcast collab is one. Hi. This is something that I only started doing in the past like 6 months or so. Before that, it was still really challenging to just like have a conversation and like tap into all these things, because it was still healing from amnesia and still like clarifying like, wait, like what is going on? What is this story? What is all of this? Um, and writing my book is a huge, huge out of my comfort zone, because it's like I'm having to reconnect. I already have like reconnected with like so many parts of me and everything, but to have it organized in a book manuscript and have a step-by-step process of these modalities that were developed in years that I don't have personal memories of is really, really challenging, and it's really uncomfortable. But it also feels really, really good, and it's very rewarding and fulfilling. And I always feel like I'm getting more and more parts of me back, because for many years, like full-time reality was developing these concepts that changed my life. And so it's a really beautiful way to get to honor those parts of me, even though I don't have full memory of all of her personal experiences, my past self. It's a really beautiful way to honor all of those parts of me. And yeah, re-entering the social scene is another one. I didn't really have a social life for 8 years, hadn't gone on dates with anybody in 8 years. And so I started dating again this year. And so that's like a really weird, surreal, trippy thing. And getting to do that from a place where I know how to have healthy relationships like for the first time, because there were all those really unhealthy patterns in the past, and then many years of just like I just need to be in social isolation so I can figure out my shit. Re-entering that it's been really, really beautiful, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, that's lovely. Do you feel like you're meeting people that are on that elevated state as well?
Um, some and more to come. There's definitely some other things that I want to like get into, events I want to attend, and I think I'll be able to meet more aligned people in that way as well. So
Yeah,
it's a journey ever.
yeah, it is a bit of a journey. And the more, yeah, you step into those spaces, the more naturally you'll meet those kinds of right people for sure. I love that. Okay, so I would love to know actually, is there one like daily practice you swear by for nervous system healing that we can leave everyone with?
I would definitely recommend going and grabbing that free 20-minute guided practice that you and I did before our call. That one is a really good in-betweener. Like if you've never done mirror work and it seems kind of like foreign and uncomfortable, it's a good starter. And even if you have been doing mirror work, just having that extra guidance for an extended period of time can be really, really supportive. Um, when you wake up in the morning, look in a mirror and greet yourself like you're greeting your romantic life partner. And so instead of waking up and you're automatically focused on, oh, I'm a human and I've got all these human things to do,
Mhm.
you take a moment to really connect with your expanded awareness and hold space for the self of you who is within the experience. And just that little moment of just connecting with yourself, attuning with yourself, helping those parts of you feel seen and loved and valued for who they are, helping your body feel safe and supported and accepted, can really set the day off for a really powerful thing. There's honestly so many practices. That's a great one. One other one that's really, really powerful is when you shower, imagine that you are washing the hair of someone you love unconditionally. And then imagine that someone who loves you unconditionally is the one washing your hair. And so when you're in the shower and your hands are touching your hands can represent your awareness of self, or if it resonates, you can describe it as your higher self. And your head is representing the experiencer of yourself or your human self. And in this moment, your hands are washing the hair of the person they love more than anyone and anything in the world. And then your head is receiving this love and this touch and this presence, and your head is receiving love from someone who loves them more than anyone, anything in the world. And it's a way to create this like relational connection with yourself. And so, like, imagine you're in the shower and your romantic partner comes in and is like, may I wash your hair? And you're like, yes, darling, yes, you can wash my hair. Right. And then you're just like basking there and you're just like laying back and just receiving, pure receiving mode. And your romantic partner is that feel okay? Is that too hard? Is that too soft? Is that too fast? Is that too slow? Like attuning with what you need in that moment and taking time to connect like you matter the most, and pouring love into you so you feel seen, you feel loved, you feel safe, you feel supported, you feel valued and wanted, you feel just accepted for who you are. And in that space, you're kind of creating that relational experience inside of your own self. And so you can kind of play with that visual or that, imagination. And so as you are washing your own hair, there's this distinction and connection between your hands and your head, between your mind and your body, between your awareness and experiencer of self. And you create this relational experience. And that one practice alone can really, really support you. And it's doing something you're already probably doing, at least a few times a week, I would think, if not every day. And so that's a really good, powerful one.
That is amazing. Yeah, I love that. There's a lot of people I speak to that still have they go in their shower and then they leave their shower and they like don't remember showering. And that was my past experiences or her past experience. And yeah, like I've worked through that and now I'm like, okay, this is the next level. I love that. Just building that more like
Yeah.
attention and really like connection to self and awareness. I love that. Sounds amazing. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing. And thank you
thank
for
you.
sharing your story. I love it. That was so potent and it's almost 11:11, so I feel like it's a perfect time to wrap up. I'd love to just share like a bit more about where people can find you online and then yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a joy to journey with you. You can first connect with me on Instagram. Give me a follow, check out the stuff that I share there. Feel free to shoot me a message and just say, hey, I heard you on this podcast. Like, want to connect, and we can be in each other's worlds that way. And then I have free gifts, including that free 20-minute guided mirror practice. And so that's one of the links on my website that I'm sure will be shared. And then if you want to dive further, I have self-guided journeys, books, courses, that training that I mentioned where you can really explore body, mind, soul through the treasure map concepts I've developed and really have a nice introduction to how neuroscience connects with your daily experiences. Lots of goodies there to explore, and you can find the perfect thing that supports your journey. And then if you want to dive into the greatest steps of magic, I do have those spaces available for my multi-month mentorship, Healed and Whole, where you really get that powerful guidance. And I'll lead you through these methods that have absolutely transformed my lives and have really touched people all over the world during the past 6 years I've been sharing those. And it's so powerful. So all those details are on my website, and I'd absolutely love to connect with you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing what you do and like always being in like this discomfort and uncomfortableness so that you can like learn and share and really just be for other people and for yourself as well. Be there in the present moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I love it so much. And one other thing is I do also have my own podcast. So you can hop over there and check out some episodes if you enjoy podcast listenings as well. And that's all free to access.
Love it. We'll be binge listening to for sure. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope you enjoyed that. We are exploring our comfort zones and our edges with every episode, every guest, and every episode I do by myself. If you have enjoyed this, please follow us on Spotify, leave a 5-star review or a review on Apple Podcasts. It would mean the world to us. We get to grow and have more informative guests on, more provocative guests if that's what you want. I am so down to see where this grows. In the meantime, follow me on Instagram at amanda.petra__, and I would love to chat with you in the DMs. What hit home, what didn't, what came to mind. It would be really cool. So I will see you there, and thank you so much. See you in the next episode. Other podcast presenters and all guests strive to deliver accurate information. They cannot address your unique circumstances comprehensively. Therefore, the content shared by any speaker on this platform is not personalized advice for individuals and should not substitute professional medical or health guidance. It is crucial to consult a qualified medical professional or for personalized advice. Additionally, always seek guidance from a healthcare provider before making decisions regarding your health or that of your family. Furthermore, it's essential to recognize that what works for one person may not work for another, emphasizing individual responsibility for health decisions as promoted on our show.